Hi, and welcome to the Choose FI Foundation's Educational Speaker Series, where we take topics from the Choose FI Foundation's pre-K through 12 financial literacy curriculum and break it down with expert speakers in the area to bring a little bit more information and ideas to the topic. Hope you enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. This is Rob Phelan. I'm here with Dan and Vanessa, who are going to talk to us today about real estate investing. Dan and Vanessa, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great. Thanks, Rob.
All right. So, Dan, you are a full-time teacher, high school teacher, right?
Yep.
And Vanessa, you're a part-time teacher, which that just sounds like an amazing job in itself, but also venturing into becoming kind of a full-time property manager, real estate investor. So this is going to be a really kind of interesting conversation for you guys at home. And it's following our conversation with Gianna McIntyre, who talked to us about house hacking. So this should be that kind of part two for how to maximize and optimize your real estate when it comes to investing and getting your costs down. All right, so guys, tell us about your real estate ventures. Like, what do you guys do outside of teaching? Like, what's this property real estate investing side look like?
Well, we invest in long-term buy and hold rental properties. So we have about 15 doors in Denver, a few out of state. So we just have bought those and we rent them out to long-term tenants.
Okay, and you said 15 doors. Now this is different to 15 physical buildings, right?
Correct.
So what do you mean by 15 doors?
So we have a fourplex, a 3-unit, a triplex. We have a duplex, and then we have a condo and a couple houses. So just kind of a mixture of different types of properties that we've invested in. We started small with a house and then kind of built up to the multifamily, which is a little easier to manage and keep track of.
Awesome. All right, so you said you do the buy and hold, this kind of longer term style of real estate investing. There are other types of real estate investing, right? What are some of the ones that you guys have heard of or maybe you have tried in the past?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate, and I don't know how thick we want to get in the weeds here, but the long-term buy and hold has been very successful for a lot of people. You can do fix and flips. On one end of the spectrum, a real simple way to invest in real estate is through a REIT. It's called an REIT, a real estate investment trust, where you just invest an amount of money. Kind of works like a mutual fund, and it goes to the manager of that REIT, and they invest it in different real estate properties, and you get a return on that. It's very hands-off, very passive, a very easy way to invest in real estate. But you don't
buy and sell those like a common ETF on the stock market. So most of your brokerage accounts can buy REITs. Yes.
But with that, you kind of lose. One of the things I like about real estate so much is that you have total control of your investment. You decide what you buy, when you buy it, how you manage it, how you maybe force some appreciation through some improvements or not. With a REIT, you don't have that much. You don't have any control. You have control of which REIT you go into, but other than that, you just wait for your returns to come in. And typically, those returns will be somewhat similar to an index fund, say maybe a little bit more. But if you get more involved with real estate, like buy the long-term buy and holds, which we do, or even short-term rentals, if you bought a house and just Airbnb'd it full time, or did fix and flips, I mean, you can get much more involved so that it becomes probably less passive, more work involved, more time, but your returns can be larger. I mean, you're putting more time in. You also maybe assume a little bit more risk with those types of investments, but your returns typically are higher.
Yeah, because that fix and flip idea, this is the HGTV, the Fixer Upper, the Property Brothers, like these guys or people that will come in and they'll buy a house that's in kind of usually poor condition. They'll fix it up, and then within a couple of months, it's back on the market. They're selling again, and they're trying to lock in a profit between what they paid for the house, what they put into it, and then what they sold it for. So that is one way you can invest in real estate. We're not going to talk about that today, but certainly something you guys can look up or just watch some HGTV if you want to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
The short term, I guess renting. You said Airbnb is an example of that. So this is where you're looking for a shorter term contract, right? Like maybe it's a weekend, it's a week, it's one day. It's not a long-term lease, like a 6 month, 12 month, 2 year.
Yep.
So like how long are your typical leases that you guys are doing?
Well, for our long-term, I actually do which is not normal, but I do month-to-month leases for a lot of my long-terms, just to give flexibility to tenants if they need to move. If there's a tenant that I'm not pleased with, it's a lot easier to end a lease than it is to evict them, which I've had month-to-month, and then they've all stayed for over 2 years. So, there's a few properties we do, but year-long leases, but it's a mixture of either a 1-year term or a month-to-month / long-term. We do have an Airbnb that we run as well, just through the Airbnb platform. People use VRBO or different ones, but we've been really happy with Airbnb, and those are anywhere from 2-night minimum to now we have a month, but
Yes.
really a week or so is kind of the max. So.
Okay.
That model, that Airbnb investing model is, it's a great way to get into real estate and make money. With the short-term rentals like that, your turnover is obviously happening a lot more often. It needs to be cleaned a lot more often. So it is more work. It takes more time to manage an Airbnb property or a short-term rental property. But the cash flow can go up quite a bit. So we have the one house that we do Airbnb full time, and before coronavirus, it was doing really, really well. It made more money, cash flow per month than our long-term tenants, but it does require a lot more maintenance, a lot more management. So we have the one, and we've kind of just said that's probably all we'll have. We're focusing now more on the long-term tenants.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like you could do a month-long, lease to a tenant for say $800, or you could do 4 weekends at $100 a night, and you would make the same amount of money, but with a lot less, time where the house is being occupied. So yeah, if you can increase the turnover, so the amount of people staying in there, and keep it occupied as much as possible, the potential for reward is much higher, but there's a lot more work involved because you have to find people, you have to maintain it, advertise it, all that fun stuff. All right, let's go. How did you guys get started in this? What made you say like, all right, we want to build for the future and we're going to do it through real estate as opposed to maybe going all in on stocks or starting your own business or whatever the other avenues are for building wealth that you could have done?
Well, I think investing in something, like personally, I don't understand the stock market. I've only lost money in the stock market. But so I think investing in something, is important. And then just the benefits I feel of building wealth are so strong in real estate. So, and I'll let Dan speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. As far as how I got started, my first property I bought when I started teaching, and without knowing it, I was house hacking it. I bought a 2-bedroom condo and rented out a room to a friend. I didn't buy it to invest in real estate. I bought it to own a property to live in and rent it to a friend. But then I ended up moving out of that, and I was renting it long-term to long-term tenants. So I was a landlord, had a property. I didn't necessarily hate that experience, but I also didn't love it. So when the time came to sell it, I decided to sell that property. And right when I did that, when I was going through the closing of selling that condo, that townhome, that's when I met Vanessa, and she was just getting started. She, I think, owned 2 houses. Well, you had exchanged a house. So she owned 2 properties, 4 or 5 doors.
Wow.
With her parents. They had kind of gone in 50-50, and she kind of reintroduced me to, well, real estate can be a wealth building machine if you let it work for you. And I got back, and now I ended up selling that property anyway, because I didn't meet her quite in time, but the capital that I got out of selling that property, we've put back into other investment properties. So it really just kind of exchanged it for other properties. But so I think when we met each other, we kind of joined forces and started learning a lot more about real estate investing and started amping up what we're doing. Okay.
So for context, like how old were each of you when you bought your first property?
I bought my first one in 2008. Kind of
excellent timing.
It was. So, gosh, I don't know. I was 30. So yeah, we're old now.
I was 30 as well. I think I was 30 when I bought that townhome.
Okay, so not like right out of high school.
No, and that's a big reason why we're so into this, and Dan's so into his, his Sheeks Freaks, but just getting kids started. If we would have started when we were 22 instead of 30, it would be, we're in a good position, but we would be in a way better position. So.
Okay, so you think they should start younger?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
It's my biggest regret is not knowing about house hacking and not knowing enough to know the benefits of real estate investing when I was younger.
Yes. And Dan, you mentioned that, Vanessa, you got started with kind of going 50-50 with your parents. Was that something you needed, or could you have done it on your own? So that was a question we had after our interview with Ziana, was like, well, how do I get started? Like, where do I get this down payment from? Do I need a parent to come in with me that has maybe better credit history or a better credit score? Like, do I need somebody else, or can I do this on my own?
It's a great question. I was not very good at saving money. I was a teacher, so I wasn't making a ton of money, and I was living in Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach in California. So it was an expensive area. I chose to kind of get my parents involved. So they funded it actually. So I actually didn't have any of my money in it, but I did all the work. So it was kind of those partnership deals of,
they were your investor.
They were my investor. And so, they helped with a lot of the renovations and stuff, but so they came in. It's just one way to partner is you do all the work. I managed the tenants, so, and then from that one home, it appreciated obviously. And we refinanced, bought another one, traded those for properties in Colorado where we are now. So that capital that I partnered with is what has allowed me to buy most of the properties we have now. So if I would have known about house hacking, I probably would have been more intentional about saving and doing it. But I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the resources that are available now through, Bigger Pockets and, all the online stuff.
Okay. So it kind of makes me think about the idea of risk. And in previous episodes, we've talked about either combining a credit score, so tying your credit score together with a parent by doing something like being a authorized user on a credit card or co-signing on loans. This is a big commitment to each other when you're going into investing in a property, because it's a lot of money and a big loan, and one party is responsible if the other party doesn't hold up their end of it. So, and as teachers, I think you guys are both very aware that family dynamics are extremely different from person to person. Should everybody be thinking about going into a partnership with their parents or their siblings when it comes to something like getting a house?
I would say that depends. Depends on your relationship with those family members. Depends on their tolerance for risk. Depends on their interest in investing in something that you want to invest in. If they have no interest in real estate, they're probably not going to want to partner with you or help support you with that. But I would say, like we mentioned a little bit ago, I think getting started earlier is definitely a huge advantage with any investment, really, but especially real estate, which is why in my classes that I teach, so I teach high school business classes, I talk to my students, mostly juniors and seniors, a lot about what are the opportunities and what are the options to invest in real estate, and how can you do that early on in life. When you say something like real estate investing to the average person, I think they tend to think of millionaires, billionaires. Those are the people that buy real estate. Those are the people that invest in real estate. I can't do that. I'm just 16, 18, 22, 25. I don't have a ton of money. I don't have the ability or maybe the knowledge or the resources to invest in real estate. And that is absolutely false. Real estate investing is not complicated. A lot of the people that do real estate investing are not the smartest people. They've just had the opportunity presented to them and they've taken advantage of it. And you can absolutely invest in real estate starting at a very, very young age. I wrote an article that was posted on Bigger Pockets is a great online community for real estate investing, and it's on their blog. I'll send you the link, Rob. You can put it in the show notes.
Thank you. Yes.
But the title of the article is "How to Invest in Real Estate how to buy your first real estate property by age 21. And I kind of lay out a little bit of a roadmap. There's 4 benchmarks to hit. And it's meant for someone who is a teenager, say in high school, 16, 17 years old, who wants to buy their first investment property by age 21. Now, you could do it sooner. 21 isn't the earliest. That's just the number I picked for the article. But it talks about 4 different qualifiers. One of them would be you need to build up a credit history or a credit score of some kind. And the best way to do that is through using credit cards, using them intelligently and responsibly to build up that credit score and credit history. Now, if you don't have a credit score or credit history, you could still buy real estate at a young age. You just need someone to come in and co-sign on that, like a parent who does have a real estate or a good credit history, credit score, so that the bank is going to make that mortgage with you. But it doesn't have to work that way. You can build a credit score starting at actually before age 18, but at least at age 18. So that by the time you hit 21, 3 years later, the bank will look at you and say, based on your credit history that we have, there's not a lot there, but there's enough that we trust you to make your payments on time. Second thing would be you have to have a steady income, a W-2 type income, where you have had a steady income coming from an employer for probably 2 years. And by the age of 21, that's not difficult to do. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. If you're a student, say you go to college, you can still have steady W-2 income on a part-time level. And depending on the value of the property you buy, that could be enough for the bank to say, well, we see that you have a paycheck coming in every month. We see your last couple of years of tax returns, and we understand that you do have solid, consistent income. So you're less of a risk, and they will potentially loan you that money for the mortgage.
Yeah, you have the ability to repay that loan, which is what they're really looking for. Okay.
Exactly. They want to know that if they give you money, that you're going to give it back to them.
Yes.
Third component would be learning. You definitely have to educate yourself. I would say to anyone who's investing in anything, don't invest money unless you know what you're investing in, not just real estate, but whether that's the stock market or some other investment. So by the time, if you're 17, 16, 18 years old, by the time you're 21, that's a lot of knowledge you can attain over those 2, 3, 4 years of reading books, listening to podcasts, watching shows like this.
It's not like you're not saying, okay, go get a 4-year degree in investing in real estate. Like, you can learn all this stuff on your own, guys. You don't need someone else's certification or permission to do this.
Yes. And for very low cost. Podcasts are free. Blog posts are free. Books do cost a little bit of money. You can buy them used, $10, $15.
Library has them for free, typically.
You can, rent them from the library. So educating yourself so that you know at least what the basics are, and then maybe a little bit more than the basics, so that when you buy that first property at 21, you're making a smart investment. And then the fourth thing is you need to save some money, because you do need a down payment. And that'll vary a little bit, but you can buy a property for as little as 3.5%, 5% down of the purchase price. So if you're 16, 17 years old and your goal is to buy that first property at 21, that gives you, there's some time there to save money. And if you're going to buy a $100,000 house and you're going to put 5% down, you want some money beyond that for closing costs and buffer in case something happens. So let's say you got to save $10,000 over the next 3, 4, 5 years. That's not impossible. That's totally doable for most young kids who are working some kind of a part-time job, or saving money, if they're gifts, graduation gifts, birthday money. You can get to 10 grand pretty easily. So you combine all those 4 things together. If you start at a young age, and you're even in high school, and you plan this roadmap, by the time you're 21, you can indeed buy your first investment property. And then a year later, buy another one, and a year later, buy another one, and be well on your way to an investment portfolio of real estate properties that can get you to financial independence at a very, very early age.
The advice you gave there is really sound as well, even for just buying your first house, whether it's investment property or not. Like, this is not a whimsical decision. You can't just decide like, oh, tomorrow, I feel like buying a house. Like, there's going to be some planning and preparation that needs to go into this. You should educate yourself on what I should be looking for, how do I reduce costs? How do I make sure I'm getting a good deal? Because if you go into these things uneducated, you often will end up getting either a bad deal, you will lose money, you will buy something that is out of your price range, or you cannot afford, or it's got problems with it that you didn't see first time. Like, there's just so many traps that you can fall into with the stock market, with real estate, with cars, and a little education goes a long way to reducing a lot of those risks. And that's kind of the hang-ups we hear a lot when it comes to real estate investing. Oh, it's this huge risk. Being a landlord, like you'll have tenants who won't show or won't pay. They'll disappear in the middle of the night. They'll wreck the place. You'll be left hanging with the mortgage. Or if you house hack, like what happens if your roommates just don't pay? What happens if they steal from you? Like, there's all of these horror stories. Like, how do you reduce those kinds of things?
Well, I mean, those are a lot of topics, but I think as far as choosing, like for tenants or roommates, I think screening is so important. And I've learned a lot through not doing it properly, and you get in a bad situation where you hate life. But through that, I've discovered, some great books and some great resources on how to manage. And basically, I mean, there's so many tools out there, especially now, to screen tenants. So we do a thorough background check, a thorough credit check. And those are free. Zillow does it for landlords. There's a cozy.co, I don't know. They have it. And so those are the two main ones. And they give you a full credit, a full background, full eviction report. Also setting strict requirements. When we do rent out to tenants, we have a 650 credit score minimum, which, people say, well, they're renting, but it's in this whole COVID-19 right now, all our tenants that have high credit aren't having a problem paying rent. I think it just shows financial responsibility. So I think, setting those guidelines, having income requirements 3 times the rent, is generally enough to cover the rent, and then verifying it, making sure that they meet those requirements, is kind of a good way to get tenants again. And there's so many resources out there to do that. So,
and we'll be the first to admit we've made our share of mistakes. Real estate investing does have risk. Every investment has risk. If anybody knows of an investment that's zero risk and has great returns, please tell me. I'd love to know about it. So yes, real estate investing has risk, and the more educated you are, the less risk there is, generally speaking. But we've learned the hard way with some of our tenants. And I would even say a lot of the people that we know that invest in real estate, their first property, maybe even their second property, those are more about the learning experience than even the investment potential. Because that first property you buy, you're going to learn so much in that process of buying it. Well, first even maybe just trying to find it, then buying it, and then managing it. That knowledge you gain in that first property is going to help you for your second, third, and fourth property. So even if that first one didn't make any cash flow or didn't appreciate, or maybe it was just a dud, you lost money. It still is an investment in your future, because the stuff that you learn from that, the mistakes that you made that now I don't want to do that again. You learn, and then the second, third, and fourth properties are going to go even better, and you will see the return on investment further down the road. So I would say to anybody, don't ever go into your first property and think it's going to be a grand slam home run. It's not. It's for the first property, you just want to kind of get through it and learn so much from that first experience for your future investments. If it happens to make good money and appreciate well, awesome, bonus. But really the first one's just about learning.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned earlier as well about the learning from podcast books, like that's really where you get to listen to people who have done it before. They've made all the mistakes, they've gone through the learning curve, and usually in a very condensed form. So like a book, you basically get a lifetime's worth of lessons from one person condensed into like 200 pages or 100 pages. Or in a podcast, you get a 30-minute snippet of 30 years of someone's investing experience. Like there's so much to learn from these. And if you can just say, I'm not going to make the same mistakes that Dan and Vanessa made, well, you've already crossed a bunch off your list. You'll make other ones. There will be ones that will come up, but the less risk or the less mistakes you make, or the more you learn ahead of time, the less mistakes you'll make along the way, and the potential for a grand slam first property could get higher, or the second one will be better, or whatever it is. So yeah, definitely, and being part of a community where you can ask these questions. So Bigger Pockets is a great example. They have a whole kind of forum where you can ask questions about investing in real estate, and you will get experts come back, or people who are just doing this themselves, and they'll answer your questions for you. Same thing with personal finance, like joining a community like the Choose FI community or Forward Anything or Stack Bench, whatever it is. Find a community of people that will answer your questions, and you can contribute your experience to as well. And through that, the chances of you making mistakes goes down.
Yeah, we both happen to be we're huge fans of Bigger Pockets, and that community. If you don't know what Bigger Pockets is, it's an online community that is specifically for real estate investors. Now they do have other components of the community that are for financial independence and managing money, but their bread and butter is real estate investing. Now, and they do have a form. It's free to be a Bigger Pockets member. I'm not pitching them, but I'm a big fan of Bigger Pockets, and I recommend anyone interested in real estate investing check them out. But they do have a forum where you can post any kind of question, and I'm on the forums quite a bit, and I've come across numerous young people, teenagers, who go to Bigger Pockets, create a little membership free, and will post a question as simple as, "Hey, I'm 18 and I want to invest in real estate. What should I do?" And many of the people on Bigger Pockets who have decades worth of experience will chime in and tell them, well, maybe I would start here, or I would start here. And I've connected to several of those young people, I think as young as 15 to say in their mid 20s, who are doing just that. They're trying to feel this thing out. Their interest has been piqued, but they haven't really started educating themselves. They just kind of want to get more information. And I've pulled some of those young people into I've started a mastermind group on Slack where those young people are there to talk to each other. They're connected and they can bounce ideas off each other. And I'm there to lend support and advice in any way I can as well. So the idea of being young in high school and starting to think about a plan to invest in real estate it's not new. It's not, it's doable. And there are some, it's not a lot, but there are some kids that age who are starting to say, okay, this is something I think I really want to do. Now we've been talking a lot about, well, you have to learn a lot, and it does involve risk, and you have to manage, and you're going to have mistakes, and you're going to have bad tenants, and all that's true. So someone might say, well, why would everyone invest in real estate? It sounds like a lot of work and a lot of headaches and a lot of risk. My answer to that would be, well, if you just look at the simple question, why invest in real estate? What is the potential return on investing in real estate? The answer really comes, there's 4 ways that real estate will help someone build wealth. If you invest your money in the stock market, there's 2 ways. If you invest in the stock of a company, that stock may appreciate, which is building your wealth. And you also may get some dividends, which is kind of a cash flow coming back to you, and you can build your wealth that way. With real estate, there's actually 4 ways. So 2 are similar. If you buy a rental property and that property appreciates, then you are building your wealth. It's really just a on paper increase in wealth until you actually sell it. Same is true with stocks. But real estate does appreciate over time, generally speaking. So you build wealth that way. The second way is cash flow. If you own a property and all of your expenses are $800 a month, but your tenant is paying you $1,000 a month, then you have $200 of positive cash flow coming into your account every month. That's the second way. That's kind of like getting a dividend from a stock. Then the third and fourth ways are kind of behind the scenes, and people don't think about them quite as much, but they're very significant. The third way real estate will build wealth is that every month that your tenant pays you money, some of that is going to pay the mortgage payment to the bank. And every time you make that mortgage payment, some of that money goes towards interest, which the bank keeps, and you never see that again. But the other part of it goes to paying down the principal of that mortgage. So every time that happens every month, you owe less money for the house. the mortgage goes down, the principal goes down. And so again, if you ever were to sell that, you would have to pay less money to the back to the bank to own that property, to sell that property. So your equity in the house is going up every month, and that is being paid off for you by your tenant, not you.
Yes. And it's different to like, so the appreciation, you're talking about the value of the house going up. So what you paid for it versus what you would sell it for, that would be the appreciation value. But this side is almost like you're knocking it down the other way. So you're actually owning more and more of that house every payment you make. So the value of your investment of the asset is going up.
So to put some real easy numbers out there, if you bought a house for $100,000, let's say the bank says, you put 25% down. So you put $25,000 down on the house. Now you own the house, but you have a $75,000 mortgage, and the $100,000 property is yours. Fast forward 10 years, maybe that property has appreciated and now it's worth $150,000. All right, so it's appreciated $50,000. You bought it for $100,000. Now it's $150,000. That $50,000 of appreciation, if you sold it on that day, that $50,000 would go towards increasing your wealth.
Yep.
You'd get that $50,000 from the buyer. Now, during that 10-year period, you've also been paying monthly payments, mortgage payments to the bank. So originally you owed $75,000, but 10 years later, to keep it nice and clean, let's say you only owe $50,000 because you've been paying off the principal every month. So you only owe $50,000, but the property is worth $150,000. Some of that was from the mortgage pay down. Some of that equity was from the mortgage pay down. Some of it was from appreciation, but they both go towards building your net worth, worth. So those are the three ways. Now, the fourth way to build wealth through real estate investing is through tax benefits. And most people just kind of let that one just kind of go, because it's not like you ever get a check that says, here's your tax benefit check. Really, the way it happens is you pay less money, so you keep more money, and that's how that builds your wealth. But if you own a real estate investment property, the government gives you incentives to do so. The government wants anyone to go out and buy a home and provide safe, affordable living to people in our country. So they give you great tax benefits for doing so. And so you get to, if you have income coming in, your cash flow coming in, you get to deduct expenses for managing that property, for maybe advertising it, for maintaining it, for repairing it. And depreciation is the big one. So the government also says, we understand that the value of that property will go down over time because things depreciate. Your refrigerator is getting older, your furnace is getting older, the paint's getting older, the roof is deteriorating. And so they will let you deduct from your income the expenses of depreciation as well. So at the end of each year, when you go to pay your taxes, you didn't actually have to pay depreciation, but the government says, well, if you take your income minus that depreciation and other expenses, maybe you made $0 on that property, so we're not going to tax you on making $0. But you actually did make money. You have income coming into your bank account every month through the cash flow, but it's kind of quote unquote erased by the depreciation and other expenses of running that property.
Yeah. So even though the value of the home is appreciating, it's going up, we're saying that the different components of the home, like as they age, their value typically is going down and they potentially need to be replaced. So you can basically write off those costs. And while, you're not getting a check per se for this, essentially, if you do have to make those repairs, you're almost making them with tax-free money. So you are saving, quote unquote, 10, 15, 20, 30%, whatever your tax bracket is each year. So it's another just like small little cog in the wheel of building wealth. Like your costs are a little bit lower, or the amount you're paying in taxes, which you don't really, like taxes is not an investment, you don't get anything back from it. So if you can reduce the amount you're paying in taxes, it can go into your wealth, assuming that you are doing something productive with it. Awesome. All right. So I want to shift into like the nuts and bolts of just like buying a property. So when you guys go to buy a new investment property, what are you looking for?
I mean, that's completely evolved over the years. So it kind of goes with where you're at. So, I mean, we started with a single family home. So it kind of depends.
So like any single family home, is the area important? Is the price of it important?
It is. I mean, I guess, again, if you're going to house hack, then you're looking for a home with, 4 to 5 bedrooms with a couple bathrooms with a good layout. If you're looking for a cash flowing home, you're probably going to invest somewhere, in the Midwest. Currently we're looking in Michigan, outside of Detroit is where we're looking. So we're looking for 3-bedroom, 1-bath homes. We're looking for homes that we can add value through adding another bathroom or another bedroom or fixing up. And so I guess it's kind of depending on really what area you're looking on. It's kind of a hard question just to give a blanket answer of saying this is what you should look for. So I guess one, you kind of have to determine your criteria of what kind of investment you're looking for, whether it's a house hack or whether it's for a cash flowing investment. And then
I would imagine even at the most basic level, like you're looking in the Midwest in that particular area because I guess the potential for reward is higher. So like the amount you pay for the property versus what you can make in rent maybe is a better ratio than you might get in, say, California or New York or Florida or any of those places.
Yeah. And like everything in real estate, there's no, I hate saying it, but it depends so much on so many things. But for the most part, we're in Denver, and, to try to find a property that meets even close to the 1% rule is impossible.
What's that?
The 1% rule. So buying a house, so if it's a $200,000 house, that it'll rent for $2,000. And it's just a very quick rule of thumb of how to evaluate, is this a good property that could possibly make me money? In saying that, it's not bad to invest in Denver, Colorado still, or in those high areas, because the appreciation is so great. And, you're having tenants pay off this very expensive asset. Mm-hmm. But, so I guess kind of determining what you're looking for. We use, some different criteria. We use, cash on cash return. So I use calculators, Bigger Pockets. Again, They have calculators. You input all the information and it gives you, cash on cash, the cap rate, the IR, all those things, to kind of help determine if it meets your criteria. We try to do cash flow of $200 a door, a minimum. And it obviously varies. If you're buying a $500,000 property, you hope for a lot more than that. But it's just kind of figuring out what your criteria are.
Yeah, so the words that were being thrown out here, cap rate, cash and cash, these are all different measures of determining whether a property is going to be worth investing in for you or not. And the most basic one, the 1% rule, what we are saying is that, again, the example was if a house is $200,000, that every month it would rent for at least $2,000. And in that $2,000, it should cover the cost of the mortgage. It should cover, the maintenance and upkeep. And usually you have like an emergency fund buffer built into that number as well. So I think the recommendation is like about 10% of the month's rent should be going into an emergency fund to cover, say, a tenant or the house being vacant for a month while you're searching for a new tenant, or repairs on the home or whatever it is. So it's not just the rent needs to cover the mortgage and that's it, because that's, I think, a common mistake people make. That they're like, oh, okay, the rent will cover the mortgage. That's great. All good. Let's move on. And not realizing that there are so many other costs that are involved. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble, because they don't then have the cash flow from the property to take care of these repairs. They have to take it out of their own pocket.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
So
a mistake I think people make. Yeah.
one of
They don't think about all the expenses. And that goes back to the educating yourself and learning before you start investing in real estate. I mean, if you read one book about real estate investing and it's a good book, it's going to lay out, hey, you don't only have to pay the bank. You have to put money aside for these types of expenditures: vacancy, repairs and maintenance, capital expenditures. You need to put money aside for other things that just might happen. And that, if you build all of that into your analysis, which you don't have to be great at math. There are calculators out there. If you want Bigger Pockets, they do all the math for you. You just put the numbers in and boom, hit submit, and then it tells you the cash on cash return, the cap rate, monthly cash flow. It tells you all that stuff. Then you can say, well, that property meets my criteria, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it doesn't mean that you can't still put an offer in. You use that calculator to tell you, how much would I pay for this property for it to meet my criteria. And you can put an offer in for that. And the worst that a seller could ever tell you is no, that's not okay. Then you move on. So the calculators are really helpful. But really the education that comes around knowing, what do I need to pay for when I actually own a property is just as important.
Yeah, and it's important to know, guys, that not every house you see is going to meet the criteria of being an investment property. Like, you do have to do a lot of digging for this. You should be assembling a team of people to help you out. So by a team, like, you are going to need a real estate agent potentially. You're going to need your mortgage lender, so the person who's going to be providing you that borrowed money to buy the house. You're going to need an appraiser, somebody to look at the house and say, okay, it's built well, it doesn't have a lot of problems. You can obviously add a lot of these skills to your own skill set as you go, but there are still kind of core people you need on your team as well. Some people will keep an accountant, some people will keep a lawyer as part of their team as well. So you have these people, not necessarily in speed dial, but certainly like people that you can call and they will be able to answer questions for you, guide you on their particular areas of expertise to make sure you're not making any major errors moving forward. And the stronger your team is, the less likely you are to make major errors, I would say. All right, so you guys mentioned buying like away from where you guys live. So you're in Denver and you're talking about buying in Michigan. How does that work? Like, how are you supposed to take care of tenants when you're not in the same area?
So we actually hired a property manager. So we had those properties we ended up renovating and then renting out. So we found a property manager, again, on Bigger Pockets, and there's a book on bigger, like on long distance real estate investing. But it just kind of goes through the process of interviewing them, asking them, one, are they an investor? I think that's huge, is working with agents and property managers and even lenders that are investors themselves, that understand what you're doing. So finding a property manager by asking, how many units do you do? How would you handle these certain situations? Are they going to try to save you money? So that's kind of, I interviewed a few. I found one and it's working out pretty well. Property management's tough. I manage the properties here in Denver for our properties and a few other people as well. And you just have that control of knowing, the work being done is necessary. The cost is appropriate. When it's out of state, it's hard and it's expensive. They charge 8 to 10% generally of the rents. They also charge the first month's rent. So you think, oh, we got a tenant in, that's $1,200. But in reality, that entire month's rent goes to the property manager. So it is definitely an expense to understand that is, and make sure that the numbers still work. Even in Denver, when we buy properties, I manage them, but I still always calculate when we're running numbers of property management, because I don't want to do it forever. It's not the most exciting and fun job, but it's not that hard once you get it down.
So a property manager is basically going to take over they're the manager, that they take over the day-to-day running of the property. So if the tenant has an issue, they call the property manager, not you. The property manager takes care of it. If something breaks, you typically are trusting the property manager to go find somebody to fix it, and then they basically send a bill to you. If a tenant vacates and you need to find somebody new, they are going to find you a tenant. So they're basically running the show in that particular area, and you're trying to find a very trustworthy person to do that, because you're trying to get somebody who will do a high quality job but try and save you money at the same time, not overcharge you, make sure they're finding good tenants, because at the end of the day, it's not their property. So the level of risk for them is almost nothing. Would you say this is a good way for people to kind of get their feet wet with real estate investing? Like, maybe try being a property manager first and see if you like it?
I would say it's not a bad way. So some of the young people I talk to who are interested in getting into real estate, I recommend to them a couple different types of jobs that they could do to get their feet wet. Okay. Or introduced into real estate. And one of them would be to work for a property management company in their local area, probably part-time if they're a student, but during the summer, maybe even full-time. And if you're working for a property management company who manages a bunch of real estate investments for various owners, just by being involved in that on a day-to-day basis and being around people who understand the ins and outs of managing a property, you're going to learn and absorb so much information that it really wouldn't be about the paycheck. It would be about what you're going to learn while you're there. So that's a great part-time job to have. It's probably not going to pay real well, but you're going to learn quite a bit. The other type of job that's similar is you could work part-time for a real estate agent or a real estate brokerage firm. So you're maybe an assistant or doing kind of the entry-level stuff for a group of real estate agents who help people buy and sell properties. You might be driving to a property to set up a lockbox or even show a property to a potential buyer. You might be doing paperwork in the office. So those are two different ways that young people can get involved with real estate at an early age before they buy their first property, just to see kind of the ins and outs of some of the areas of real estate. You could work for a contractor who does repairs on different real estate investment properties.
It's kind of the idea of building your talent stack and your network, isn't it? Like that you're putting yourself in situations where you're going to pick up information, skills, and people who will be good to know, good to ask questions to, can act as mentors. Or like say you're working in a property management company and you see, okay, there are these people out there who need a property manager. Like I now know how to approach them if I want to do that on my own. So like you can use these situations to your advantage. And I always encourage like young people to do that. Like your part-time job can be a really useful tool. Like it doesn't have to just be the first place that will hire you. It doesn't have to be your local grocery store or a fast food chain. Like you can go find lots of different opportunities if you go chase them down.
Yeah. And I definitely recommend that if someone is a teenager and they want to introduce themselves to real estate, doing some kind of a job like that. But kind of going back to where we started with that idea of house hacking, which your last guest talked about. By far, I think that is the best strategy for someone young to buy their first property is to house hack it. There's so many advantages to doing it that way versus just buying a house that you don't plan on living in and buying it strictly as a rental investment property. The house hacking strategy is, I think, just hands down the way to go if you're young. And even if you're older, I mean, we're in our 40s and we house hack, a version of house hacking by renting out our basement that we talked about. So I'll put a plug in for, there's a book that Bigger Pockets has published called The House Hacking Strategy, written by a friend of mine, Craig Curlop. And it is all about how to do the house hacking strategy. No matter what age you are, it would work. But when I talk to my students in my classroom and the other young people I've met through the Bigger Pockets forums, I steer them all towards house hacking, or at least I said, you need to look at this option first, because it is, in my opinion, the best way to go. You're living there, so you get to see the ins and outs of that property every day. Because you are going to live in it, so it's a primary residence, you can put a lot less down, say 3.5% to 5% versus 20 or 25%. So you don't need to save as much money. You get to pick your tenants, the people that live in the house with you, and you get to make sure that they're treating the property well. There's just a lot of benefits to doing that, and you're going to manage the property. You're not going to buy a house hacking property and then pay a property manager to manage it for you. That doesn't make any sense. So you're going to be the property manager for that property. So when the refrigerator needs replaced, you're the person who has to say, okay, I'm going to go to Home Depot and I'm going to look at some other options, some different options, and I'm going to pay somebody to install it for me, or maybe I do it myself. But you have to take care of those issues. So you get to kind of see what a property management manager would do if you did want to pay one in the future, because you're doing that yourself. So that book I mentioned, The House Hacking Strategy, walks someone through everything you need to know to go down that path and buy your first property with that strategy. It's great.
Awesome. All right. So I think the last question then and it kind of ties in well to the house hacking thing, is how do you pick good roommates? And say, like, I think we talked about this before we got on the call, that a big hang up that a lot of people have when it comes to house hacking is either, I don't want to live with strangers. I don't necessarily want to live with people in general, but I also want to save money on my housing. And I don't want to basically charge my friends money. I don't want to turn our friendship into a business. Like, do you have anything you could say about those kind of concerns?
I mean, I think once people, if you would have told me years ago that I would be renting my house out at this point in life to someone in our basement, I would have told you were crazy. But I think once you see the financial benefits of it, you're like, wow, this is great. She's paying half our mortgage for us. And it's really minimal interactions and things. So I think just seeing the benefits of having a roommate or having shared housing, I think it'll make it worth it. Same with property management. It's kind of a pain. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. No one wants to get calls that, the washing machine isn't working or whatever. But again, you realize things are going to happen. It's comes with the territory of owning this great wealth building asset. So I'm going to deal with it. So I think if you really don't want to have tenants or share a house and you really want to live by yourself with it, you could always buy a duplex and live in one half and rent out the other half. Or I think you can get up to a 4-unit building and still get a FHA loan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one way to do that for sure. But again, just like we said, screening tenants, if they come and look at the place and you get a weird vibe and you're like, I don't want to live with them, then you don't. It's easy enough to do that. So
Rob, you mentioned talking to young people about the idea of house hacking, and I've talked to my students and said, when you graduate from high school and you go beyond, a lot of them go to college. It's a great goal to try to maybe buy that first property by the time you're 21 or right about maybe your junior year of college, and then rent out the rooms to your friends. And I've walked them through this strategy and shown them with numbers the financial benefit that it would have for them. And they're very much, they get all that and they say everything is great, but I do get pushback from them. Like you mentioned about the idea of, well, I don't want to rent a house to my friends. That would feel weird. I don't want to be their landlord. I don't want to feel like I'm making money off my friends. And I get that. And it's a common kind of rebuttal to the idea of house hacking from young people. But I think what I would say to them and what I do with my students is you're going to live in a house. You're going to rent a house probably in college or when you're in your early 20s, regardless. And you can rent from someone like me, a 40, 50, 60-year-old guy or woman who has a house, and they rent to you and your friends, and you pay them rent, and they're making money off you, and that's fine. But you're just changing it around so that you own the property and your friends are paying you the rent, and that's not ripping them off. That's not taking advantage of them. They're going to be paying rent to somebody. Why not have it be you? And I would think that, if I was 20 and I was renting a house from my friend who owned it, I would feel a little bit more safe knowing that, okay, I know the owner, it's my friend. If I have any issues with the place, I know who to talk to. I see them every day. And I just don't think that a young person's friends are going to think any less of them because they write the check out to them every month instead of a stranger who they've never met that owns the house. So
yeah.
Try to get past that. I would say to young people, try to get past that stigma of, I don't want to make money off my friends, because I don't think they're going to look at it that way. They have to pay somebody, so they'll just pay you.
Yeah, and I think people are afraid sometimes of introducing money into relationships because it can sour a relationship. Like, it's kind of one of those unofficial things that I sort of recommend to students, like try not to borrow large amounts of money from your parents, like without a formal agreement in place, because it makes dinner at the table seem weird. Like it's hard to go do something fun if you're like, oh, well, I owe my parents like $1,000. Why are you going out to the movies? Same kind of thing with your friends. Like, I think people can be afraid of, well, what happens if my friend is sloppy or they don't pay their rent some month? Like, I have to go to my friend then and say, look, I need you to give me the money, or I need you to get your act together. And it can be a hard conversation to have, especially at 18, 19, 20 years old. So a couple of things we could do there. Like, if you need to say, like, I own the property, but like my parent is going to act as the property manager, landlord kind of thing. So all checks would go to them. That's fine. If you feel like you need an older person in that role to just basically collect checks, that's fine.
Yep.
One thing I really recommend doing is, whether you are going to be a landlord or just a roommate, is to actually draft a roommate agreement. So a formal agreement where you guys are saying, here are the expectations of how we are going to act, conduct ourselves. This is the state we expect the house to be kept in. This is when the rent should be paid at this time to this person in this amount. And if things don't go to plan, you've got something to go back to and say, look, this is what we agreed to, and I need you to uphold your end of the bargain, please.
So yeah, you definitely want to have a lease in place, no matter what, with each of your roommates, for a house hack. And in addition to that, I think still you could have an additional agreement that says that lays out the expectations for having friends over. Like, what are parties going to look like if you're going to have friends over? Who's going to mow the lawn? Who's going to clean the kitchen? And things that are, so you just kind of have a plan in place. And to be honest, you should probably do that whether you own the house or not. If you're going to live with 4 or 5 friends,
you're going to a dorm in college, like absolutely, like do that with the other people in the dorm.
Exactly. So even with all that said, if the lease and renting to your friends, if having the agreement, if all that still sounds kind of icky to a young person, then I would say, well, then don't rent to your friends. Find other people your age that you maybe don't know, that aren't in your circle of friends, that still need a place to live and are happy to pay somebody rent. And do the thing like the background check and the credit check. And for most young people renting, maybe bring in their parents and have them sign the lease with them. And again, this is all laid out in the house hacking book and other resources about how to do this. So maybe you buy a 4-bedroom house, and you live in 1 bedroom, you rent the other 3 bedrooms out to other people that go to your college, go to university, live in your town, that are roughly your age, and they're now just acquaintances. They're tenants. They're not your best friends. If you just can't get by that hurdle, then buy the property and live with people that you don't know well as friends, but you can still trust them and they can still pay you money. You can still build your wealth.
Yeah, they can be friends of friends who you maybe get a recommendation for. They can be people you know loosely. Maybe they went to the same high school as you. You're not necessarily close friends with them, but you know that they're at least a decent person. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who, when I was in college, was looking for roommates, and he would only rent to grad school students because he figured, all right, you've made it through 4 years of undergrad, you're into grad school, you're probably not going to be as big a partier because of that. So I think I can trust you a little bit more with my stuff, or to be a responsible roommate.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever your criteria is, like look for that. I will say a high GPA in high school does not guarantee being a responsible roommate in any way. So interview is a great one as well. Like interview people, get a vibe for them. I think Vanessa, you said that. And if you don't like it, don't start an agreement. Like make sure that you are very picky about who you are living with, because once they're in, it's hard to break that agreement and get them out sometimes.
And the other thing, when you're picking people, if you buy a house and you're house hacking and you're interviewing people, whether they're your friends or not, to live in the house with you, keep in mind that person they know, okay, this person owns the house. They're going to be my landlord, and they're going to be living in the house with me. They're going to be there every day. So someone who is going to cause trouble or be irresponsible, they're not going to want to live in a house with the owner. They're going to probably go somewhere else to rent. So even if someone's interested in living in a house with the owner, which as a house hack, you own the property, they're probably less likely to be causing issues because they know the owner's there every day, every night, right beside you.
Absolutely. All right, guys, this has been awesome. I think a lot of really good information in here for our audience and some actionable stuff. And hopefully we've kind of lifted the veil a little bit on real estate investing. And maybe it's not as scary an idea as it was before you started watching. So Dan, I know you run a blog website with information for younger people about financial topics. I'm sure real estate is included in there somewhere. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I started a blog site called Sheeks Freaks. So my last name and then the word freaks. And freaks speaks to that. When I talk to my students, I say to them, if you are young and you think about your money, that is not normal. That is very abnormal. Mm-hmm. Young people are not supposed to think about money. Well, they're supposed to, but it's not the norm. I mean, when I was in high school and college, I definitely didn't think about my financial future and investing money and building wealth. That was the furthest thing from my mind. So when a young person comes along and they're actually thinking, hey, I do want to think about and learn about making more money, saving money, investing money, and potentially investing it in real estate, that is different. That is not something that normal young people do. So by definition, if you're not normal, you're kind of a freak.
Yeah.
In a good way.
You're an outlier, you're weird, you're abnormal, you're strange, whatever the word you want to use is, but in a very positive sense this time. Yes.
Yeah. So Sheeks Freaks is the blog site. It's just www.sheeksfreaks.com. I post articles on there that are aimed at young people, high school, college age, young people who have an interest in their money, who want to learn more. So they're written in a way, I think, that makes sense to young people. Right now I'm kind of going over some of the basics, but the first 10 posts on the website are really about financial independence, passive income, which real estate investing is a form of passive income, and some of those things, and helping to build your net worth, and so that you can be able to reach financial independence at a very early age. And I think one of the articles is about, well, how do you retire 10 years before your parents, which a lot of young people are doing because they invest in real estate or other forms of passive income at a very early age. So yeah, you may ignore that website and those articles. I also have an Instagram page that kind of mirrors that, which is just Sheeks Freaks on Instagram.
Dan, Vanessa, thank you guys so much for coming on with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.